Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through stacks of info, pull out the key nuggets, well, basically give you a shortcut to being really well informed. And maybe, share a few surprising facts along the way. Today, we're diving into something pretty huge, actually, but maybe something you don't think about much. The global bakery market.
Yeah, I mean, your morning croissant, sandwich bread, birthday cakes.
Mm.
It's this quiet giant, right? Touches almost everyone every day. We're digging into a report here from Cognitive Market Research, Global Bakery Market, Growth and Projections by Region, our goal. Get past just the numbers, understand the real dynamics. Where's it booming? What does it tell us?
Exactly. These aren't just stats on a page. They really paint a picture, a pretty compelling one, of an industry that's just constantly expanding worldwide. And it highlights these subtle shifts, sometimes surprising opportunities. Is the growth where we expect it, or are there little hot spots popping up? Yeah, that's a great question. Let's start big picture then. The overall global market size, and honestly, the scale here is kind of mind-blowing. Back in 2021, the global bakery market was already pulling in, get this, almost $450 billion.
Yeah, $448.453 billion to be precise. Already huge.
Already huge. And it's set for some serious growth. The projection is over $550 billion by 2025, and then it really takes off, aiming for almost $830 billion by 2033.
$829.994 billion, yeah. It's a massive leap.
That worked out to a compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of over 5%, 5.264% globally. That's a lot of dough, pun intended maybe.
Oh, indeed.
Okay, so nearly $830 billion by 2033. How does that break down? Where is this growth really rising? Regionally speaking.
Okay, well, let's slice it up regionally. North America, no surprise, held the biggest piece of the pie in 2021, almost $180 billion.
Okay, big base.
Big base, and still growing strong. Projected to hit over $320 billion by 2033. That's a CAGR of just under 5%, 4.898%. Pretty robust.
Right.
Europe was next, number 2, also a major player. Started around $130 billion in 2021. Expected to reach over $230 billion by 2033. And interestingly, the CAGR is almost identical to North America, like 4.896%. Very steady growth there, too.
So the two big established markets growing at almost the exact same steady pace.
Exactly. But then things get really interesting when you look at Asia Pacific.
Okay.
Its market size in 2021 was smaller, sure, around $85 billion.
Right. Less than half in North America.
Correct. But, and this is the key thing, it has the highest regional TGR globally. We're talking over 6.5%. 6.505%, actually.
Wow.
Which means it's projected to more than double. It's expected to hit over $175 billion by 2033. That signals some major shifts happening there.
Definitely the one to watch that.
Yeah.
What about other regions?
Well, South America is also significant. Started at about $30 billion in 2021.
Okay.
And it's also expected to more than double, reaching over $63 billion by 2033. Also a very strong CAGR, over 6.3%. So real dynamism there, too.
So South America growing nearly as fast as Asia Pacific.
Very close, yeah. Then you have the Middle East, around $18 billion in 2021, growing to over $27 billion by 2033. The CDR there is a bit more modest, under 4%, about 3.8%.
Still growth, though.
Still growth, absolutely. And finally, Africa. Smallest regional market, started under $8 billion in 2021.
Okay.
But still projected to nearly double, reaching over $13 billion by 2033. That's a CAGR of around 3.7%. So growth across the board, really.
It really is clear then. Established markets, North America, Europe, steady growth. But Asia Pacific and South America are just, wow, expanding incredibly fast. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Within those regions, are specific countries just running away with it? Or are there, surprising underdogs?
Absolutely. Let's drill down a bit. North America, like we said, dominated by the U.S.
Right.
The U.S. market was around $147 billion in 2021, set to grow to over $257 billion. Huge numbers.
Yeah, the lion's share.
Definitely. But check out Canada. Its CAGR is actually stronger than the U.S., over 6%.
Right.
6.101%. So Canada's growing faster, from about $20 billion to nearly $39 billion. It just shows even within mature markets, you get these different dynamics.
That's a great point. So U.S. is biggest, but Canada's accelerating faster.
Oh.
Okay, let's hop over to Europe. You mentioned UK, Germany, France as big players. What stood out to me was France. You see a really strong KGR there, too, over 5.6%.
Yeah, 5.666%, projected to go from about 17 billion to over 32 billion, almost doubling.
But the real surprise, I thought, was this rest of Europe category.
Yes.
It actually had the highest CAGR in the whole region, over 6.2%.
Exactly, 6.235%. That points to really significant, maybe less centralized growth.
Pacific.
We do, yeah. Echoes of that same pattern. So overall, APAC growth is amazing, like we said. China leading the way in size, almost 26 billion in 2021, projected to double to over 51 billion.
Okay, big numbers for China.
But then look at India. Just wow. A truly remarkable CAGR, over 7.2%, 7.264%.
Over 7%.
Meaning its market is set to blow past doubling, going from around 12 billion to over 27 billion. Huge potential being unlocked there.
Incredible.
And Singapore also showed really robust growth, over 7% CAGR as well, 7.048%.
Another fast grower.
But just like in Europe, guess which segment had the highest growth?
Let me guess. Rest of APAC.
Bingo! The rest of APAC segment had the highest CAGR of any segment we looked at globally, a staggering 8.5%, 8.494%.
8.5%. That's incredible. That really says something about diverse expansion beyond the giant.
It absolutely does. It screams rapid, widespread growth, probably lots of innovation, changing tastes taking hold across many different countries in that region.
Okay, let's quickly cover the others. South America. Brazil was biggest in 2021.
Yep, Brazil led at over 9 billion. But again, following the pattern, Argentina showed the highest AGR in South America, over 6.8%, faster growth rate.
Right, Middle East.
Saudi Arabia was the largest market, over 6.5 billion in 2021. But the UAE had the highest regional CAGR, nearly 5%, 4.912%, showing strong specific market dynamics there.
Okay. And Africa.
Key players were South Africa, around 2.4 billion, and Nigeria, around 1.4 billion in 2021. And, you guessed it, the rest of Africa segment again recorded the highest CAGR on the continent, over 4%. So burgeoning growth in those less concentrated areas seems to be a global theme.
It really does.
So if you connect all those dots, this trend with the rest of categories, it's not just noise in the data.
Right.
It strongly suggests these emerging, maybe less consolidated markets are where a lot of the really rapid expansion is happening. Huge untapped potential, perhaps, in these diverse subregions that aren't just dominated by one or two big players.
So it's like the established markets provide this steady foundation.
Exactly. Steady, reliable growth. While these other areas, maybe with less concentration, are just accelerating their bakery consumption much faster. It's this really widespread expansion, not just happening in a few main hubs.
So thinking about this, what does it all mean for you, our listener? I mean, just consider the sheer scale we're talking about. This everyday thing, bread, pastries, it's part of a market already worth nearly $500 billion. And it's on track to be almost double that, heading towards $830 billion in about a decade.
That's a miss.
It's affecting economies everywhere, creating jobs, opportunities, and subtly changing how people eat all over the world. It makes you think, how can something so basic be capable of such dynamic, widespread growth? So just to recap quickly, global bakery market.
Here.
Huge. Approaching $500 billion now, rocketing towards over $800 billion by 2033. It really shows the quiet, pervasive power of something so fundamental.
And it does leave you with a really interesting question to ponder, doesn't it? With this massive growth, especially in those fast-expanding resto regions, how is that going to reshape things? Think about supply chains, local food traditions, even farming. What crops get grown? Are we going to see like a global homogenization of croissants and donuts?
Or maybe the opposite.
Or, maybe an explosion of regional specialties suddenly finding bigger markets. It's something to think about for the next decade.
An excellent thought to chew on, indeed. We hope this deep dive gave you some food for thought on the delicious, actually pretty dynamic world of baking. Thanks for joining us. Have you ever stopped to think about what really makes that artisan sourdough, maybe? Or even just a convenient breakfast bar so popular? It seems pretty simple on the surface, right? Just flour, water, a little bit of magic, maybe. But when you really look closely, the global bakery market is, well, it's anything but simple. Today, we're taking a deep dive into this constantly rising industry, and we've been soaking up all the insights directly from the trusted experts at Cognitive Market Research.
Yeah, and I think you're going to discover this really powerful, sometimes surprising mix of forces that are shaping what we all eat and why we eat it. We're talking about, well, everything from the sheer need for convenience to, the allure of premium goods, plus growing health consciousness, and yes, actually a whole lot of culinary creativity too.
Okay, let's try and unpack this then. So why is this market booming? I mean, you said convenience. It feels like it really comes down to one big thing. Just our fast-paced lifestyles today. Convenience and portability seem like massive drivers, right? We're talking single-serve snack cakes, maybe those breakfast pastries, the on-the-go bars. They just perfectly fit as quick, satisfying solutions for busy mornings or, those midday cravings. But is there more to this convenience factor? I mean, more than just saving time.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about speed, though that's part of it. What's really fascinating here, I think, is how bakeries and cafes, they play this key role beyond just providing food. They've kind of evolved into these lifestyle destinations almost,
Yeah.
offering both comfort and efficiency. You grab your coffee and a croissant, and it's this little moment of calm efficiency in what might be a chaotic day. It's that third place idea that research shows can actually give you a little micro well-being boost. It's more than just buying something. It's about optimizing those small pockets of time we have.
That's a really good point. So it's convenience, but with an experience layered on top. Okay, so while everyone's racing around looking for convenience, there's also this kind of interesting countercurrent, isn't there? Pulling consumers maybe in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, why are people suddenly willing to spend, more, sometimes a lot more, on something like a loaf of bread? What's driving this premiumization trend?
Well, I think it highlights a really deep desire for quality and for an experience. We're seeing consumers increasingly willing to spend more on artisan stuff, handcrafted products. Think about that perfect sourdough loaf you mentioned, or gourmet pastries, maybe custom designed cakes for like special occasions. And this trend, if you look at it broadly, it has this ripple effect. It's fantastic for the growth of independent bakeries, obviously, but it also pushes larger retailers to start stocking high quality, sort of small batch style products too. It really becomes about savoring the craftsmanship, not just eating bread.
Yeah, that growth in independent bakeries is great to see. And it actually forces the bigger players to adapt, doesn't it? Like, think about your local supermarket. You've probably noticed a huge expansion in their in-store bakeries lately, right?
Mm.
Supermarkets are investing, heavily in these on-site bakery sections. They're creating these incredibly inviting, sensory-rich environments. You know that smell of fresh bread when you walk in?
Mm.
That doesn't just boost bakery sales. Research shows it boosts total store traffic. For the entire store, it's a really powerful draw.
Exactly. And don't forget cafes and coffee chains in this picture. They are absolutely crucial outlets for high-margin baked goods, especially those indulgent treats like croissants and cakes that just pair perfectly with a cappuccino or a latte. They're tapping into a very specific consumer moment, that little treat you get with your coffee. It makes the decision almost effortless for you.
Okay, so there's a lot of positive momentum. But despite all this delicious growth, the industry definitely faces some significant challenges. Let's not sugarcoat it. One major restraint seems to come from shifting dietary trends. We've all seen the impact of, say, low-carb lifestyles and the explosion of gluten-free products. And that's driven by both medical necessity for some and wellness choices for others. These definitely cast a shadow on traditional wheat-based goods. How big of a threat is this, really, to the core bakery business?
Oh, it's a fundamental shift. You see it most clearly in the bread segment, I think. Products that were once staples now face the scrutiny for being perceived as quote unquote unhealthy or maybe just outdated. It really forces traditional bakers to innovate, or they risk losing their market share to all these alternatives popping up.
Right. And it feels like the bakery market just can't catch a break sometimes.
Mhm.
Just when you think you've perfected your recipe, the price of butter goes through the roof. Then there's that persistent threat of raw material price volatility.
Hmm.
We're talking key ingredients like wheat, butter, sugar, those edible oils. How do bakeries even manage? How do they stay afloat and maintain steady profit margins with these global fluctuations? It must be incredibly tough.
It's incredibly difficult, yeah. And adding to that complexity is just the intense market competition. The bakery sector is, well, it's highly fragmented. You've got artisanal producers, supermarket bakeries, large industrial players. They're all vying for consumer attention. And this overcrowding, it naturally creates downward pressure on prices. It makes brand differentiation really, really difficult in what's already a pretty saturated market. You have to find a way to stand out in a very crowded field.
But and this is where it gets really exciting, I think. Innovation is rising. Like well-proof dough, Despite those serious challenges, the industry truly seems to be fighting back. The leading trend appears to be these better-for-you baked goods. But I wonder, can a donut ever truly be better for you in the consumer's mind? Or is this maybe more about clever marketing? How much can they really shift that perception?
That's a really valid question. I mean, the aim of these offerings is pretty clear. It's to reposition baked goods as more health-conscious options, to allow consumers like you to feel, well, maybe a bit better about indulging. It's about finding that balance. It's not necessarily about making a donut into a health food, that's probably a stretch, but it's about making a healthier version of a baked good, maybe, or offering alternatives that fit a wellness lifestyle, things like high-fiber muffins or protein-packed bars. And the market data actually shows consumers are buying into it, so it indicates the perception is shifting, at least somewhat.
Interesting. And along those lines, we've seen the mainstreaming of vegan and plant-based bakery items. They're definitely not niche products anymore, are they? It feels like they're a standard part of the offerings for major brands and bakeries now. It almost feels like this happened overnight, doesn't
It
it?
kind of does feel that way, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really been driven by some incredible innovations in food science, particularly in replacing traditional ingredients like eggs, butter, and milk with things like oat, soy, and various nut-based alternatives. These advancements are making plant-based baking not just possible anymore, but genuinely delicious and highly desirable for a much broader audience than just vegans or vegetarians.
Right. And finally, something that seems like a real standout, particularly in that artisan sector we talked about, it's the revival of fermented and sourdough products. Why has sourdough become such a star all of a sudden? It seems like everyone is either baking their own or actively seeking it out. What's the appeal?
What's so striking about sourdough, and I think why it's truly become the star, is that it just perfectly taps into that consumer desire for clean label foods, back to basic stuff. Foods that offer both great taste and some clear nutritional benefits. It's prized for its traditional methods, that whole fermentation process, which can be good for gut health, and of course that rich, rustic flavor. It's kind of the whole package. You get heritage, perceived health benefits, and it's delicious.
So when you boil it all down, what does this mean for you, the listener? The global bakery market is this really dynamic interplay. You've got convenience, premiumization, health consciousness, and just sheer culinary creativity all mixed together. And it's constantly responding to our shifting consumer values. It's a really fascinating ecosystem to watch.
Absolutely. And I think as long as bakeries continue to innovate, continue to adapt to these evolving demands, well, the market is poised to keep growing. One fresh loaf, one flaky pastry, or maybe one vegan cookie at a time. It's really a testament to human ingenuity, isn't it? And just our enduring love for baked goods.
Definitely. So here's something to chew on. What new ingredient or dietary trend might reshape our bakery aisles next? And how might that influence your own daily choices?